The stars went out. Not all of them. Not at once. But enough of them vanished in one long strip of sky, almost 40 degrees wide at the far edge of the Kepler watch zone, that every long-range telescope on the HC border stations caught it at the same time. Point three duty officers on three different stations filed three different reports within 60 seconds of each other. The wording was different. The confusion was the same. Something was out there, something very large. Something that was blocking the light. The first ship crossed the FDL threshold at 3:47 station time. Then another. Then 5 more. Then 20 T Kepler Station Bravo. The sensors stopped counting properly at 39 and quietly restarted themselves. Because 39 ships of that size entering known space at the same moment was the kind of thing the system had never been built to accept as real. By 4 o'clock, there were 47. Each one was the size of a city that had decided to keep growing upward until it forgot why it had started. They moved in formation, not random, not military in any normal sense. Deliberate, like someone was writing a sentence across the dark. Point seven xenolinguists on 7 stations studied the pattern. All 7 sent the same message up the chain. IT spells a word in 11 dead languages. Languages from species so old their names now belonged more to ruins than to history. The word translated the same way every time. The inevitable. That was what they called themselves. Nobody slept at HC Command that night. Orithel stood at the forward observation deck of the throne of First Light and looked at the small yellow star ahead of him. He felt nothing but patience. He had stood inside this moment before. Not this exact star. Not this exact system. Not this exact arrangement of younger worlds waiting in the dark. But the shape of it. Yes, the weight of it. The silence before a revelation. The feeling of a whole civilization standing on the edge of being told what the universe was. He knew that feeling well, that he was tall even for a veil. His people all had 7 limbs. 4 legs set low and wide for balance. 3 arms rising from the upper body, the 2 outer ones long and powerful, the middle one shorter and more precise. His skin changed color when he thought deeply, moving through shades of blue and gold that human language had no exact words for. The nearest human words might have been cathedral and ember. His face held 4 eyes in a straight line. The outer 2 watched distance. The inner 2 read the faces of the beings he spoke to. He had spent 70 years perfecting the speech, not the words. The words were ancient. The words had been set down by the first consequent 12 generations before him. What he had perfected was the delivery, the pause before claim, the drop in tone before the final line, the exact vibration that made the voice land in a listener's chest before their mind had even understood the sentence. That he had learned early that belief was not mainly an idea. It was a feeling. You did not argue a species into faith. You made belief feel like something that had already begun inside their body. Then you gave that feeling a name. The name was always the same. The veil, the first made, the light givers, the architects of all living things. That he looked again at the yellow star. At a small, warm, ordinary star, the kind that breeds soft life, wet life, carbon life, the kind that makes creatures who are afraid of the dark. Those were usually the easy ones. That he straightened his arms and thought of the 11 species already inside the Dominion. Their labor, their resources, their worship, their gratitude, their relief at no longer being alone in a universe that did not care whether they lived or died. Orithel did not think of himself as cruel. He did not think of himself as a liar. He believed the way a man believes when he has never once been shown a reason not to. The proof, to him, was everywhere. 4,000 years, 11 species, at a dominion stretching across a quarter of charted space. What else could that be except divine? He turned to his signal officer. Begin the revelation. The broadcast started. Duty Officer Prionaire was on her 3rd cup of coffee when the signal hit the station. IT hit every frequency at once. Not from one ship. Not even from one point in space. That IT came from the empty space between the 47 vessels. As if the ships were only speakers and something larger was doing the talking. To IT rolled through electromagnetic receivers. IT rolled through quantum relays. IT rolled through backup analog systems. And later, in her report, Priya wrote that it also seemed to hit something inside her chest that was not a receiver at all. She sat very still for 8 seconds. The voice was enormous, not loud. Enormous, the way a mountain is enormous. The way something can feel too large to look at all at once. The frequency made the back of her teeth ache. It made the muscles along her spine try to straighten without permission. She gripped the edge of her console. The translation software struggled for a moment, then caught up. The words came through. We are the veiled, we're the first made. Before your sun burned, we burned. Before your world formed, we built. You have been alone in your confusion for long enough that we have come to end your confusion. We are your makers, that we are your purpose. You may now know peace because you are known. The voice stopped. Only then did Priya realize she had been holding her breath. She let it out slowly. Then she opened the response terminal on her scope. The 47 ships hung in the dark, each one wiping out stars behind it. Each one so massive that her brain kept trying to read them as natural objects instead of ships. She opened Form 7C. Unverified entity. First contact protocol. Biological and technological classification request. She filled in what she could from the sensor data. Unknown biology. Unknown government structure. Unknown command authority. Unknown home system. Unknown technological development index. She left the empty fields blank. Then, in the request section, she asked the unknown entities to provide the missing information at their earliest convenience. She attached the standard diplomatic registry note. She sent it. Then she picked up her coffee. Across the station floor, a young analyst named Betts was still sitting with his mouth open. Priya looked at him. "Follow up the chain," she said. "And tell the kitchen we're going to need more coffee." The Form 7C reached the throne of First Light 11 minutes later. IT arrived the way a pebble lands at the feet of a man, expecting a crown. Orthel's signal officer handed him the translation with the careful face of someone delivering news they did not know how to survive delivering. Orthel read it. Then he read it again. The document requested biological classification. Technological level according to HC standard scale. Names and functions of the 47 vessels. Identity and authority rank of the commanding representative. Home system coordinates for diplomatic registry. 8T. The bottom was a small automatic note. Thank you for contacting the Human Compact. A representative will be in touch within 72 standard hours. If this matter is urgent, please indicate urgency in field 7C2. Page 2. Orthel lowered the document. He stood at the window for a long moment. Outside, the yellow star burned on, entirely unaware of the importance of what had just happened. His generals waited. His attendants waited. The whole bridge had gone still. He thought of the 11 species that had come before. Some had wept. Some had fallen silent with awe. Some had prayed before the revelation had even finished. None of them had sent paperwork. No one has ever sent paperwork, he said quietly. His signal officer waited. Send a follow-up broadcast, Orthel said. The full revelation again? He thought for a moment. No, something shorter. Remind them who we are. What he was feeling inside his chest. He filed under confusion that he was wrong, but he did not know that yet. Admiral Sarah Vance was eating a sandwich when the priority call came through. Turkey, mustard, slightly stale bread. The Unbroken Covenant's kitchen had been running on reduced supplies for 6 weeks, while waiting for a delayed resupply shipment that logistics had promised to fix and had not fixed. Sarah Vance had stopped expecting logistics to fix anything on time about 15 years earlier, and she had made peace with stale bread the same way she had made peace with most annoying things in life, by refusing to waste emotional energy on them. "Admiral," said her comm officer, "Command wants you on priority channel. Kepler's zone contact." She took another bite of the sandwich. With her free hand, she pulled up the sensor report that had been sitting in her queue. She looked at the count. She looked at the mass readings. She looked at the formation transcript, the inevitable. She had served in the expeditionary for 31 years. She had made contact with 6 species. Point 2 had been friendly. Point 1 had not cared. Point 3 had tried to kill her in ways that ranged from ordinary to inventive. None of them had introduced themselves with a word. That meant the inevitable. Then she opened the translated broadcast. She read the lines about being the first made, about being the makers of all living things, about ending humanity's confusion. She read the whole thing with the same expression she used for supply reports. Then she set it down. "Give me a line to Kepler Bravo," she said. "Yes, Admiral." She finished her sandwich. Ensign Dio Adami had been aboard the Unbroken Covenant for 11 weeks. He was 23 years old. He had graduated third in his class at the HC Academy, which meant he was very good at work done inside controlled environments. Space, he had learned, was not a controlled environment. Space was controlled environments floating inside something that did not care about control at all. He sat at his monitoring station on the secondary bridge deck when the alert cascade began. Yellow first, then amber, then the hard red that meant everyone stopped pretending this might be routine. He watched the data arrive. Ship count, mass estimates, broadcast transcript. He was from Lagos, a city that in his experience had very little left in it capable of surprising a person, that he had seen enough there to make grown soldiers pause. He did not think of himself as easy to scare. He was scared now. Not dramatically, not shaking, not frozen. Quietly scared, the kind where your body keeps working, but some honest part of your mind starts doing math in the background, and every answer ends badly. 47 ships. Each one, he checked the mass reading again. Then he checked the unit conversion, because surely something was wrong. No, each one had a mass greater than Earth's moon, but he did not say that out loud. Around him, other junior officers were reading their own screens with the same look on their faces. The look of people doing the same math and arriving at the same answer. Then the order came down from command. Admiral Vance had reviewed the situation. Admiral Vance had read the broadcast. Admiral Vance had seen Kepler Bravo's response. Admiral Vance had said nothing dramatic and then had gone back to work. Adami looked at the 47 contacts on his screen. Then he looked at the status panel for the Unbroken Covenant .1 ship. Mid-class hull, 22 weapon systems, .19 fully functional, .3 awaiting repair parts from the same delayed supply line that had already made the bread stale. He very carefully chose not to do that math. Orithel sent the second broadcast. This one was shorter, and this one included a demonstration. The veil did not threaten. Threats were language used between equals, and there were no equals here. They demonstrated that a vessel called the Sacred Evidence moved out from the main formation and took position beside a small, lifeless moon in the outer system. The moon was about 700 kilometers across. In O atmosphere, in O water, in O life. Vale had checked. They were thorough. They did not destroy living worlds by accident. The Sacred Evidence activated its compression array. The moon did not explode. IT did not crack apart. IT folded inward. Over 4 minutes and 17 seconds, the whole body collapsed into itself, shrinking into a perfect sphere about 1/4 of its original size. Its new surface was smooth and bright as a mirror. IT turned slowly in orbit. IT was beautiful in the cold way that absolute power is sometimes. Beautiful. Orithel watched it and felt the calm satisfaction of a man doing excellent work. He had seen this convert species before. The Thorath had begun praying before the process had even finished. He waited. The human response arrived 40 minutes later. IT was not from their military. IT was not from their diplomats. IT was from Dr. Yael Hoffman, Department of Astrophysics and Planetary Sciences, University of New Geneva. Her message expressed formal admiration for the Veil's remarkable and unprecedented application of gravitational engineering. Then she asked whether the Veil would be willing to share their methods. If not, would they at least allow a research team to study the compressed moon at close range? She explained that it represented an extraordinary chance to examine large-scale gravitational compression in vacuum conditions. A gesture of goodwill. She had attached 3 of her own research papers on related theory and hoped the Veil might find them interesting. Orithel read the message twice. Then he looked at the compressed moon, then back at the message. He had used that demonstration 47 times. 40-7 IT had produced worship, surrender. Or the kind of silence that comes just before both. Never once had it produced academic curiosity. Never once had it produced research papers. At the end of shift, Adami pulled up the full day's record and read through everything. the form from Dr. Hoffman's request, the automated diplomatic note assigning the Vale a case number and placing them in the contact queue. He sat with it all for a while. Outside the viewport near his station, the stars were mostly still there. From this angle, the Vale fleet had not yet swallowed enough of the sky to make it look truly wrong, that it almost looked normal. Almost like yesterday that he thought about the moon, about the fact that some species could crush a moon into a polished sphere in a little over 4 minutes. And humanity's first serious response to that had been, interesting. Can we study it? He was not sure whether that made him proud or frightened. Maybe both. Somewhere above him, Admiral Vance was likely reviewing reports, making calm decisions, or eating another sandwich on stale bread while the largest first contact event in living history unfolded around her. He trusted her. He was not entirely sure why. He had been aboard for 11 weeks. He had spoken to her directly twice, both times for less than 3 minutes, both times about routine matters. But he had watched her, the way young officers watch the people above them, trying to understand what posture a person should take when the universe stops behaving. She was never startled. That was it. He had watched 47 moon-mass ships appear at the edge of human space. And he was still fairly sure Admiral Sarah Vance was not startled. He did not know whether that was a healthy quality or a damaged one, that he suspected it might be both. He filed his shift report. Then he went to the mess for dinner. The bread was stale. He ate it anyway on the throne of First Light. The fleet held position. That alone was strange. The Vale did not wait. They arrived. They revealed. They were received. That was how it had always gone. There was no doctrine for waiting because waiting had never been necessary before. The gods had never had to wait. Orithel stood by the window after the shift cycle changed. His attendants brought his evening meal. Soft harmonic tones filled the chamber, the kind used to help veil meditation. He looked at the yellow star and felt again the thing he kept calling confusion, that he was a precise being. His language was precise. His thought was precise, that he did not tolerate vague interstates if he could help it, because vagueness was how error entered a system. He broke the feeling apart carefully. Yes, there was confusion. That part was real. The humans kept responding in ways he had no framework for. That was confusing. But beneath the confusion, under it, deeper down, there was something else, something his language did not contain. Because in 4,000 years of revelation, no one had needed such a word. He touched that feeling only briefly. Then pulled away from it. He ate, he listened to the harmonics. Tomorrow, he decided, he would escalate, that he would summon the consecration fleet. 80 vessels. The war made sacred. The final statement of Vale authority. He had never needed them before, but perhaps the species needed something larger than a compressed moon. Something too large to file, too large to study, too large to place in a queue and answer within 72 standard hours. He would give them something they could not mistake for a research opportunity. He was certain of that he was wrong about that too. But that belonged to tomorrow. Tonight, 47 ships waited at the edge of human space. The stars burned around them. And for the first time in 4,000 years, a fleet that had never failed to bring a species to its knees found itself waiting on a species that had answered revelation with forms, polite registry notes, and academic enthusiasm. The gods waited. And in the mess hall of the Unbroken Covenant, a young ensign from Lagos ate stale bread while the universe, as it usually does, continued. The second day was quieter than the first. That was the part Ensign Dio Atomy remembered most later. Not the ships, not the crushed moon turning in the dark like a polished stone. The quiet. The way the Unbroken Covenant kept moving through its day as if 47 city-sized ships were not waiting at the edge of human space for humanity to fall to its knees. People ate breakfast. People changed shifts. Systems were checked. Reports were filed. The secondary crew quarters were still running 3 degrees too warm. And 2 engineers were still arguing about whether that counted as a serious problem or only an annoying one. Lieutenant Vasquez lost his coffee mug again. He spent 20 minutes looking for it. He finally found it in engineering, which made no sense at all. That he blamed Petty Officer Chun. Chun denied everything. The argument was still going when Atomy sat down at his station, and opened the overnight reports. The 47 contacts, still stationary. The compressed moon still. Rotating point 3 new research requests had gone out to the Vale Fleet overnight. Point 2 from universities. Point 1 from an organization called the Applied Gravitational Systems Consortium, which Atomy had never heard of, but which apparently had very strong opinions about large-scale moon compression. He looked at the fleet on his scope. Still there, still waiting. That he had grown up near the ocean. People who grow up near large bodies of water learn certain things early and keep them in the bones. Point 1 of them was this: the sea was not most dangerous when it was loud. Storms announced themselves. Storms made noise. The dangerous moments were the still ones, the flat water moments, the ones where the surface looked calm but felt wrong. The Vale Fleet had that feeling, that he did not say that to anyone. The people around him were still arguing about Vasquez's mug, and he did not want to be the person who interrupted a coffee mug argument to explain that the sky felt like the sea before something BAD.S. Oh, he filed his shift notes and kept it to himself that on the morning of the third day, HC Command sent a representative. Not military, diplomatic. Ambassador Celine Brossard. She had 20 years in Xeno relations and the controlled expression of a woman who had already seen enough in life to stay calm through most things. Even so, on the shuttle approach, she checked the sensor readings more often than usual. As she neared the outer edge of the Vale formation, she sent a hail on the same frequency the Vale had used for their revelation. The answer came back in 19 seconds, faster than she expected. That told her something. The Vale were paying close attention. The responding voice was not the giant voice from the original broadcast. This one was smaller, tighter, more controlled, still deep, still carrying the faint undertone that made the back of her teeth ache if she didn't relax her jaw. "You approach the fleet of the First Maid," the voice said. "Ambassador Celine Brossard," she replied. "Human Compact Diplomatic Corps. I'm here to support communication between the Vale Dominion and the HC. I'd like permission to come aboard." A pause. "You wish to board?" "If that is agreeable, yes." Another pause, longer this time. "You do not send a leader." "I am a leader," she said pleasantly. "A diplomatic one. In the HC, diplomatic leadership handles first contact. Military leadership handles other situations. We try to be specific about which tools we use for which jobs." This pause was long enough for her to drink half her coffee. Tea last, the voice said. "You may approach." She noted the tone. Not welcoming. Not warm. It sounded like someone trying to understand why a door had opened when he was sure it was supposed to stay closed. She filed that away. It would matter later. Brossard spent 6 hours aboard the throne of First Light. They received her in a chamber designed for awe. High ceilings, starlight falling through clear upper panels. Walls that breathed with slow color. Acoustics that made every small sound feel important. She recognized the design immediately, not because she was an architect, because she had spent 20 years walking into rooms other species had built to shape human feeling before the conversation even started. Good work, she thought, very effective work. Probably devastating on species seeing it for the first time. They offered her a chair. It had clearly been built for a human by people who had never actually sat in one. It was slightly too tall, slightly too hard, set at an angle that made her back work just enough to notice. She suspected that was not an accident. She said nothing about the chair. Orithel spoke. He spoke of the Dominion. He spoke of the 11 species already within it. Their peace, their order, their elevation from confusion into purpose. He spoke like a man who had given this speech many times and believed every word of it. That interested her more than cynicism would have. Cynicism was easy to understand. Belief was harder. She listened. Then she asked questions, gentle questions, curious questions, questions that sounded like learning rather than challenge. She asked about the 11 species. She asked what their lives had looked like before Dominion rule and after it. She asked about trade, about resource distribution, about governance, about decision-making. Orithel answered all of it. And as he answered, she noticed something important. He was proud, not pretending to be proud, not performing pride for effect, actually proud. The way a builder is proud of a thing built over a very long time by steady hands. When he finished, she folded her hands and said, The HC appreciates the information. We will need time to review and consult internally before any further decision. Orithel looked at her with all four eyes. How much time? She thought for only a second. 60 days would be a reasonable starting point. The chamber went very quiet. 60 days, he repeated. Give or take, she said. These decisions involve a lot of people on our side. Democracy is thorough, if not always fast. She said it as simply as she might have commented on weather or gravity. That was the part that stayed with Orithel after she left. Not the refusal. Not the number. The ease with which she had said ITAS if the approval of God was one more issue to be reviewed by committee. She stood from the wrong chair without showing discomfort. Then she reached out and attempted something like a handshake with his central hand. That startled him more than he allowed to show an lesser species representative had ever initiated physical contact with a high consecrate. She thanked him for his hospitality. Then she left. Orithel stood alone in the chamber after a shuttle cleared the perimeter. 60 days, he had delivered revelation 11 times. The average movement from shock to surrender had taken 4 days. The longest had been the Thorath, stubborn and stone-minded. And even they had taken only 19.60. He walked to the window and again felt the thing under the confusion. The thing his language still did not name. He pressed against it in thought, then pulled back. He called his generals. It was time. He decided, for something that could not be filed, studied, or delayed for 60 days. The demonstration came at 1400-hour station time on the 4th day. 3 Veil ships moved in a triangular formation 2 million kilometers from Threshold Station, an inhabited HC orbital platform with a population of roughly 40,000. They did not move closer. They positioned themselves where the people on the station could see them clearly with their own eyes from the observation decks. Then all 3 ships activated their surface illumination arrays. They lit up, not like buildings, not like ships, like stars. Columns of light poured from them in shifting waves, crossing from infrared to visible spectrum to ultraviolet in slow, beautiful motion. The patterns were not random. They formed words, the same words as always, the same message that had, 11 times before, opened the moment when a species realized resistance was no longer a meaningful category. On Threshold Station, 40,000 people gathered at the viewports they watched. The light was, by every report later filed, astonishing. Many observers described it as the most beautiful thing they had ever seen. Something so large and so carefully made that the human eye felt too small for it. People cried. Not because they believed, because beautiful things can make people cry. And this was beautiful. Then someone in the crowd said, "Is this a coordinated light show?" Someone else said, "I think it's spelling something." A third person opened a translation app and said, "It says they're gods." The crowd went quiet for one moment. Then somebody laughed, not cruelly, not mockingly, just the laugh of a person whose brain has hit something too strange to process in a straight line. The laughter spread, because laughter is one of the things humans do when screaming would also make sense but feels less useful. Within an hour, someone had uploaded a clip from the observation deck. Within 3 hours, it had more views than anything else on the HC Media Net. Within 6 hours, most of the comments were jokes. The press conference was not Admiral Vance's idea. Command wanted a visible senior officer in front of cameras. The public was doing what publics usually do when something huge and unexplained appears at their door, a mix of fascination, dread, and humor used as insulation against both. Command wanted someone steady, someone credible, someone who looked like they could stand in the same room as the impossible and remain unimpressed. They called Vance. She accepted the assignment the way she accepted most things, with a single short sound that meant yes, and also meant she would not be discussing how she felt about it. The conference was held aboard the Unbroken Covenant, a briefing room. HC flag behind her, a table in front of her. 12 journalists arranged in a half circle, carrying that specific hungry politeness journalists get when they know history is happening and want a clean quote from it. Vance sat down, poured water from the pitcher, looked at the room with the face of a woman who had spent 31 years in command and had grown completely, deeply tired of dramatic people mistaking questions for power. The questions began. Troop movement? not for public release. Evacuation plans? Under review. Diplomatic status? Handled by Ambassador Brossard's office. Civilian threat assessment? Ongoing. Then a journalist from the Sol System Independent Network leaned forward. Young, sharp. Very aware he was about to ask the question people would remember. Admiral, he said, do you personally believe the Veil's claim? Do you think they might actually be gods? The room went still. Vance looked at him. She lifted her water glass, took a drink, set it down. Then she said, I believe they've got big ships and a marketing problem. The room stayed silent for 2 full seconds. Then it didn't. Adamy watched the clip 4 times. The first time because it appeared in his feed and he clicked before thinking. The second time because he wanted to make sure he had heard her correctly. The third time to study her face, the flatness of it, the total lack of performance. The way she had said it not like a joke, but like a practical summary of reality. The fourth time because he simply could not stop. Big ships and a marketing problem. 47 ships. Each one larger than anything humanity had ever built, a moon compressed into a polished sphere, a 3-ship light display designed over 4,000 years of religious conquest and perfected across 11 species. A system refined again and again to strike directly at the fear centers of creatures afraid of the dark. And Vance had called it a marketing problem. The clip hit 30 million views before his shift began. By the end of his shift, it had passed 200 million. By the next morning, it had been translated into 67 languages, including 3 Veil dialects by scholars who had not slept much since the fleet arrived. Adamy sat at his station and watched the numbers rise. He felt something he could not cleanly name. Not pride, not fear, something exactly between them. Like standing on the edge of a blade, that he thought about what kind of species humanity was. A species that saw a moon crushed like fruit and asked for research access. A species that watched divine spectacle and made jokes. A species whose admiral asked whether she believed in gods, answered with marketing problem, and meant it the same way she meant everything else. Flat, plain, real. He tried to imagine how it looked from the other side. From the Veil side, 4,000 years, 11 species, a formula that had never once failed. And then this species, these soft, noisy, paperwork filing, coffee-drinking people who should by every previous model have been terrified into obedience and were instead laughing, requesting 60 days for review, and turning revelation into a media cycle. He looked back at the Veil fleet on his scope. 47 ships holding position in the dark, waiting for worship, getting jokes, administrative delay, and comment sections full of remarks about divine branding budgets. He sat with that for a while. Then he went back to work, because the monitoring still had to be done, and because work, more than almost anything else, helped when the universe was acting strange. The scout ship crossed the line on the 6th day. It was not a warship. Not by Veil standards. By human standards, it was still huge, but inside the Veil fleet it counted as small. A close-range vessel. A ship built for looking, measuring, testing. It crossed the contact boundary at 02:11. The boundary itself had been set by HC Border Protocol and sent to the Veil in the very first paperwork packet, along with everything else the Veil had clearly not expected to receive from a species they were trying to impress in a worship. T213. The Unbroken Covenant registered the crossing. T214. Adamy flagged IT. T215. Admiral Vance was informed. T216. The response went out. Formal. Polite. A. Noticed that an unauthorized vessel had entered the contact boundary and was requested to return to its prior position. The scout ship did not return. IT kept moving. T231. Long-range sensors placed at 17,000 kilometers inside the line. T232. The contact disappeared. Not exploded. Not hit in any way human sensors knew how to read. In O debris. In O radiation bloom. In O weapons trace. In O last signal. Just gone. The marker vanished from the scope the way a word vanishes when someone erases it. Cleanly, leaving the space where it had been looking almost suspiciously empty. Adamy stared at the blank section of screen. He did not ask what had happened. He had been aboard only 11 weeks. But that was long enough to learn a few useful truths, and one of them was this. There were moments when asking was less important than understanding. Something had happened, something deliberate, something very clean. And whoever had arranged it had not thought explanation was necessary to he logged the contact loss and kept working dead on the throne of First Light. The report reached Orithel at 03:00. He read it 3 times. Not because it was hard to understand, because he needed 3 readings to accept that it said what it said. The scout vessel was gone. 23 crew, no battle, and no warning, and no debris, and no communication. Simply removed a S if space itself had opened a hand, taken the ship, and closed again. His generals argued for retaliation immediately. Threshold Station was the obvious target that IT was. Inhabited, visible, close enough to turn into a lesson that a strike there would answer the disappearance of the scout vessel with something final, something unmistakable, something that would end all paperwork, jokes, research requests, and administrative delay in one bright line of force. Orithel refused. Not because he was gentle, he had overseen destruction before, when doctrine required it. But the destruction of civilians was outside the revelation. That mattered to him. You did not break what you claimed you had come to save. You did not ruin what you called holy. The moment you did that, you stopped being a god and became merely a conqueror. And in Orithel's mind, those were not the same thing at all. The difference mattered. IT mattered the way load-bearing things matter. Still, the scout vessel was gone. 23 of his people gone. He stood at the window and looked at the yellow star and thought about humanity. What kind of species watches a divine light display with tears in its eyes, then quietly erases a reconnaissance ship from existence and says nothing at all? The unnamed feeling under the confusion pressed upward again. He stepped away from it. He straightened all 3 arms. Then he gave the order, deploy the consecration fleet. The room went still. The consecration fleet was not an ordinary reinforcement. That IT was not even really a fleet in the normal military sense. That IT was a statement point 80 sacred warships. The largest expression of Veil authority ever built. IT had existed for centuries. That IT had never once been needed. Now Orithel had decided it was. Atomy was in the mess when the alert came through. Dinner. The bread was still stale. That he read the update on his terminal. Then he set the terminal face down and finished eating that. Would have looked strange to some people, but it made sense to him. Panic never improved bread. And if the universe was about to become more dangerous than it already was, he preferred not to meet that change hungry. That he thought about the scene near Lagos. About the way the water went flat before something shifted. He thought about his younger sister, Amara, who was 12 and wanted to be a xenobiologist. He thought about the letter he had been meaning to write her. He had been putting it off because he didn't know how to describe what was happening in a way that was honest without being cruel. He looked at the stale bread in his hand. He finished it. He decided he would write tomorrow. Tomorrow felt like a reasonable place to begin. Then he went to bed. Across the contact zone, 127 Veil vessels gathered at the edge of human space. And across public human channels, the main response was still jokes. And O1 aboard the Covenant slept especially well that night. N01 said. So, they were that kind of crew. The consecration fleet arrived like a door slamming shut. All at once, an O staggered entry. An O slow build point 80 ships dropped out of FTL in a ring around the existing 47. Closing formation so fast and so clean that 3 border stations briefly lost sensor function, because their systems had never been built to count that much mass appearing that quickly point 127 ships. The number sat on Atomy's screen like something with too many sharp edges to look at directly. He was on shift when they appeared. He saw the contacts bloom outward in red across the scope. Huge, precise, wrong in their scale. The bridge around him went quiet. Not startled quiet, arithmetic quiet. The kind that comes when every person in the room is doing the same math and getting the same answer, and none of them want to be the first to say it aloud. He looked at the 1 marker for the unbroken covenant. Then at the 127 markers around it. He picked up his water, drank, set it down. Then he went back to work because work was still the only thing his hands knew how to do. Admiral Vance stood on the command deck and watched the full formation close. The main scope showed a 4 million kilometer radius in clear tactical display. She watched the 80 new contacts lock into place around the original 47. She watched the geometry of a Titan. Commander Ibera stood at her left point, 15 years in service. Compact, precise, the kind of officer who never fidgeted. He was not fidgeting now, but his jaw was set harder than it had been an hour earlier. "Admiral," he said, "recommended action?" She studied the formation. She thought about a decision made 3 months earlier in a secure room at HC Command, a room with 6 people in it. Same clearance, same tired eyes, same understanding that a species introducing itself as gods was very unlikely to accept refusal politely. She thought about what had been approved in that room, what had been built, what had been moved into place, how long it had been waiting, and what was going to cost to use. "Hold position," she said. Ibera looked at her. "Hold," she said again. He nodded, turned back to his station, and held. Vance picked up her coffee, drank from it. On the screen, 127 ships arranged themselves like a closing hand. She remained exactly as startled as she usually was, which was to say, not visibly at all. On the throne of First Light, Orithel confirmed the human position 3 separate times. Once was not enough. Twice was still not enough. 3 times. His sensor team checked it, then checked it again, then stopped. Because there was no different answer to find. There was one human ship in the contact zone. 1, the same mid-class vessel that had sat there from the beginning. The Unbroken Covenant. Registry HCMCV 7741.1 ship. Not retreating, not hiding, not even moving. Just sitting at the center of 127 sacred warships, as if this arrangement did not mean what it obviously meant. His lead general said what all of them were thinking. "They have not moved." "I can see that," Orithel said. "It is an insult." "Yes. They want us to see they are not afraid." Orithel looked at the single human ship. He thought about the forms, the research requests, the ambassador asking for 60 days, the press conference clip his intelligence teams had translated for him, the line about large ships and a marketing problem. That line had produced in him the first clean flash of anger he had felt in years. Then there had been the scout vessel, gone. And now this .1 ship. He thought not about tactics. Tactics were simple, but he thought about what this meant underneath tactics. What kind of species behaves this way? He had spent 70 years reading civilizations, reading the shape of fear inside them. Every species arranged its fear into something. Gods, governments, weapons, stories. And if you understood the shape of a species' fear, you understood the species. He looked at the one human ship. He could not find the shape of their fear. "Prepare the weapons arrays," he said. "All arrays?" asked the general. Orithel looked at the one ship. "Yes," he said. "Let us finish this." The hail opened from the Veil side, a direct command channel to the Covenant. NO performance, NO revelation voice, NO forced awe carried through the signal. Just a clean line open for one mind to speak to another. Vance accepted it. Orithel's real voice came through the bridge speakers. Still deep, still heavy. But now it sounded only like a voice, a person's voice. Not a mountain pretending to talk. "You have one ship," he said. "Yes," Vance answered. "You understand what you are facing?" "Yes." A pause. "Then you understand that what you're doing is not courage." Vance said nothing. "It is something else," Orithel continued. "I would like to understand what." There was a short silence. Not the silence of someone searching for words, the silence of someone selecting which true sentence to use. Then Vance spoke. "This is Admiral Sarah Vance, HCMS Unbroken Covenant," she said. "We've reviewed your revelation. Our answer is no. You have one chance to turn your fleet around. After that, we start." There was silence on both sides of the line on the Covenant's bridge. No one moved on the throne of First Light. No one spoke. The channel remained open. Each side could hear the other ship's systems breathing through the line. The low hum of engines. The faint structural sounds of large vessels holding together in cold space. Then Orithel said, very quietly, something in Veil that the translator struggled with. The closest human version was, "So this is what it sounds like." Then the channel closed. Then the Veil fired. It was not a warning shot, not a measured strike. Not an opening exchange at IT, was everything. 127 warships fired every weapon they had at a single human vessel. On later sensor review, the discharge looked like a small star being born. The light was visible from Threshold Station with the naked eye. The energy wave from the combined strike registered on seismic monitors on the third planet of the system, the center of that light. Where the unbroken covenant had been, where every targeting solution said it still was, there was only fired a lot of fire. Atomy stopped breathing. The bridge did not make a sound. The fire expanded. System reports began screaming numbers across his screen. Energy levels that no human ship should have survived. Weapon yields that should have made the very idea of survival feel embarrassing. Then the light began to clear. The marker for the unbroken covenant was still there. Hull scorched. Point 1 engine down to 15%. Lateral shielding compromised along the port side, a long list of secondary failures climbing his display faster than he could read them. Still there. The ship was still there. Atomy became aware that both his hands were gripping the edge of his console, so hard his fingers hurt. He let go, then gripped again. His mouth was opened. He closed it, looked at the marker again, then at the damage report, then at the marker. The thought in his head was not clever. IT was only this. How? The answer. To how had started 3 months earlier. The unbroken covenant had arrived first. Visible. Loud. Easy to track. Its registry signal had been broadcasting clearly on every channel. Point 1 ship. Exactly as advertised. But over the next 9 weeks, something else had happened. 41 smaller HC vessels had moved into position inside the future contact zone and then gone dark. Dramatic hiding. Impossible cloaking device. Just patience, planning, and geometry. The Veil sensor net was excellent, ancient, powerful, built for front-facing threat logic, built to watch the obvious paths, built to monitor large movements, direct approaches, hostile formations, built by a species so used to superiority that it had never really needed to imagine an enemy willing to wait in the dead spaces created by its own formation. The 127 Veil ships formed blind zones, shadow pockets, angles from which a smaller force could exist if it arrived first, stayed still, emitted nothing, and accepted the miserable practical facts of living hidden in the dark for 9 weeks. Eating from cramped galleys, sleeping in shifts, speaking as little as possible, doing nothing heroic except enduring stillness. 41 ships. Not warships in the heavy sense, smaller, faster, together carrying a strike package built around one question. What does a species with 4,000 years of weapons history not know how to defend against? After 18 months of human work, the answer had been simple. Angles. The Veil systems were built for threats that announced themselves, threats that came from the front, threats that behaved like threats were supposed to behave. They were not built for 41 human vessels firing from inside the shape of the Veil's own. Confidence. The Covenant did not need to win the exchange. That was never the plan. That IT only needed to survive long enough. 0.8 minutes. That was the number. 0.8 minutes from first incoming fire to full strike execution. The Covenant needed to hold for 8 minutes. That IT held for 8 minutes and 40 seconds. The first hidden strike hit the Veil formation from a direction their systems had labeled empty. Then a second. Then 7 at once. Then the rest began to roll through the formation in sequence. Not chaotic, not glorious, not loud in the heroic way battle reports often pretend battle is. That IT was methodical. Cold. Point 1 system after another. Weapons arrays. Drive cores. That FDL control nodes. The strike package had not been built to kill. The IT had been built to stop. Leave ships drifting. Leave crews alive. Leave whole vessels intact enough to understand what had happened to them. On the Covenant's bridge, the 8 minutes looked like this. Atomy at a station with both hands on the console, watching the hidden HC markers appear where the scope had shown empty space a moment earlier, watching one Veil contact fail, then another, watching the list update like items being checked off. This one disabled, this one disabled, this one done. Vance standing instead of sitting, which was the only visible sign that she recognized the moment as different from any other. Her coffee on the console beside her, untouched. The hull screaming twice, not groaning, not shaking, screaming, metal under. Stress so extreme it sounded almost alive. Portside lights cutting out for 4 seconds, then returning. A weapons tech somewhere on the lower deck, shouting a damage report. No one on the bridge had time to answer. Lieutenant Vasquez's coffee mug, the famous one, the one that had been lost and found and blamed on Shun, sliding off a side console and shattering on the deck. And someone, somewhere behind Atomy, making a sound that was almost a laugh. Not because it was funny, because sometimes the body reacts to impossible things by breaking in strange directions for 1 second and then stitching itself closed again. 0.8 minutes and 40 seconds. Then Commander Ibra said, in the same voice he might have used to note a weather update, strike package fully executed. Admiral, 63 Veil contacts confirmed destroyed. 18 mobility disabled. 12 remain at full capability. Vance picked up her coffee, took a sip, set it down. Then she opened the channel. Orithel had not sat down during the engagement. He had stood through the full 8 minutes and watched the consecration fleet come apart from inside its own formation. Not all at once. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, it had happened piece by piece, contact by contact, with impossible precision, from angles his doctrine did not cover, with weapons his systems had not seen coming. His generals were speaking over each other, recalculating, demanding new numbers, trying to find a model in which the last 8 minutes made sense. He heard none of them. He was looking at the scope, 63 ships gone, 0.18 adrift, and powerless, 0.12, still active, 0.1 human ship still on the board, scorched, damaged, 0.1 engine limping, still there. The line opened. Vance's voice came through. Not raised, not triumphant. The same voice as before, dry, level, tired, maybe, but steady. Your move, she said. The bridge of the throne. A first light went completely silent. Not because there was nothing to say, because everyone was watching one man understand something for which he did not yet have language. Orithel looked at the one human ship, then at his own hands. His skin had shifted color again, not by will. The usual golds and cathedral blues were gone. In their place was a shade he did not know. A color for involuntary things. He stood inside it. He thought about 4,000 years, about 11 species, about the formula, about all the times it had worked. He thought about fear, and then he understood the thing he had failed to understand from the first day. Humans were afraid. That was the answer. They were not fearless. The sensor readings from the Covenant made that plain enough. Grip pressure on consoles, stress response markers, heart rates, their intercepted internal signals, the ambassador's body tension, the young officers, the bridge crew. They were afraid, and they had done it anyway. That was the thing his language had no word for, because in 4,000 years of ministry, no species had ever been afraid and answered no anyway. Not one. He felt the unnamed thing rise at last to the surface. This time he did not push it down. This time he named it correctly. Then he Saturday for the first time since the fighting began. Orithel sat down heavily in the command chair, like a being who had just discovered the weight he had been carrying was not sacred certainty after all, but only untested belief. His generals looked at him, waiting, watching for the next order, for the shape of what came next. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Do not return fire." A general stepped forward. "High Consecrant, do not return fire." The bridge stayed silent. Outside, 12 Veil warships held position in the dark. Around them drifted the wreckage of 63 ships that had never once been needed before today. And at the center of the field, scorched and listing slightly to port, one human ship remained exactly where it had been from the start, still there. Atomy sat at his station with his hands in his lap. The bridge had been quiet since Vance's last transmission. Not the old kind of quiet. Not the arithmetic quiet from before the battle, when everyone was doing the same numbers and getting the same bad answer. This was something else, that a quieter quiet, a room, trying to understand what shape the last 8 minutes and 40 seconds had left behind. He looked at his scope. He looked at the damage report, still crawling down one side of the screen. That he thought about the 41 smaller HC ships that had spent 9 weeks hidden in the dark. 9 weeks, sitting in shadow, living in silence, sleeping in shifts. eating whatever their tiny galleys could manage, speaking as little as possible because silence itself was part of the weapon. Silence. Patience. Angles. He thought about what kind of species planned something like that. Then he thought about his mother in Lagos, about his sister who still wanted to be a xenobiologist, about the letter he still had. Not written. Across the scope, the 12 remaining Veil contacts held position. Not advancing, not retreating, just there, sitting in the dark like something deciding what it was now. Vance was still standing. Her coffee had gone cold. She had not noticed. The hull still held the heat of the port side impacts. Atomy could feel some of it through the station panel in front of him, a faint warmth in the metal, the physical memory of what had just happened pressed into the skin of the ship. But he put his hands back on the console. They were steady till he noticed that he held on to that fact because it was small and good and real .1 human ship. Scorched, leaning slightly to port .1 engine at 15%. Still there, his ship. Still there. The 12 remaining Veil ships did not move for 9 hours. They held a tighter formation than before. Not by doctrine.by instinct. The way living things gather closer when the thing in front of them has proved itself worth fearing. The wreckage drifted around them, 63 ships reduced to silence, 18 more alive, but unable to move, their drives carefully cut apart by the strike package. Their crews, presumably, were still inside, sitting in whatever silence followed the collapse of certainty that had lasted 4,000 years. The unbroken covenant held its own position. Vance let them sit. Commander Ibera asked twice if they should advance. Reduced the last 12 the way they had reduced the others. And it cleanly. Twice, Vance said no. She said it without speech-making, without explanation. The way she said most things. Complete answers that did not need help from other sentences. Atomy thought he understood. You did not rush a lesson while it was still being learned. Not because of mercy alone, though mercy was part of it. Because the stillness itself mattered. Because those 12 ships, sitting there inside of their dead and disabled fleet, were learning something in real time. And interrupting that would be wasteful. He was not certain that was what Vance was thinking, that he only suspected it was the He kept watching the scope and waiting, and every time he noticed his hands were still steady, he was grateful all over again. Orithel requested communication on the 14th hour. Not a broadcast. Not a holy address, not a direct line. Ship to ship, command. To command, the kind of channel that means no one is performing now. No one is speaking to crowds. This is only two people saying what has to be said. Vance accepted. Orithel did not begin with ceremony. He simply started offering things. The Dominion stored wealth. 4,000 years of tribute from 11 species. Technology, gravitational compression methods that FDL refinements humanity had not yet developed. Medical knowledge gathered from 11 different biological traditions. Some of it aimed at diseases HC medicine, still treated with educated guesswork, and hope that he offered political status. Within the Dominion, a seat at the governing body, a voice in how the collective was managed. He offered all of it in the flat voice of a man who already knew, somewhere deep down, that he was offering the wrong things, but did not yet know what the right things were. Vance listened. She let him finish. Then she said, "We don't want what you're selling." There was a pause. That last Orithel said, "Name what you want. I have not survived 70 years in ministry by being inflexible. Tell me what the HC requires, and I will determine what is possible." For a moment, all he could hear on the open line was the sound of the Covenant itself, a damaged hull redistributing stress at a drive running below normal output. The low working hum of people still doing their jobs inside a ship that had just survived the impossible. Then Vance answered. "Nothing from you," she said. "That's the point." A longer pause. "I do not understand." Orithel said. "I know," she replied. "That's also the point." Silence again. Then, unexpectedly, Orithel asked, "What are you afraid of?" Vance considered the question. "Lots of things," she said. "But not you. Not anymore. You had one move, and you made it. Now we both know what it was worth." The line stayed quiet for a moment. Then Vance said, "Go home, Orithel. Take your 12 ships and go home. Tell them what happened. Tell them exactly what happened. You are letting us leave. Yes, my generals will call it mercy. Your generals can call it whatever helps them sleep. Another silence. Then he asked, "What do you call it?" Vance looked at the scope. "AT, the 12 remaining ships. At the drifting remains of the other 80. Then she said, "Information. Shared freely. No charge." And she closed the channel. The 12 ships left 3 hours later. They moved slowly. Not in good order. Not in a clean military withdrawal. Slowly. Like something uncertain about the ground ahead. They crossed the contact zone. They passed through the wreckage of their own fleet, moving carefully between broken ships and disabled hulks and pieces of things they had once believed could not fail. They did not look back in any measurable way. Atomy watched them go. He watched their contact markers grow. Smaller on long-range display. Then smaller still. Then reach the edge of sensor range. Then disappear into the dark. Gonti sat for a while with the empty space on the scope. Then the anomalies began. The first came from Dominion-controlled space, a system called Veteran, home to the Morath, a quiet species under Veil rule for 260 years. Model subjects by all records. Their tribute shipments were always on time. Their consecration temple was maintained properly. Their assigned Veil liaison reported no instability and had been reporting the same peaceful conditions for 40 years. The anomaly was simple. Their tribute shipment did not leave on schedule. That HC intelligence flagged it as possibly meaningful. Then moved on. The second anomaly came 6 hours later from another system 3 sectors away, a silicon-based species called the Orith, under Dominion control for 800 years. Their temple sent a maintenance request through the Veil administrative network. Routine at first glance, the central illumination array needed replacement. Then the reason line was read more carefully. The array required replacement because the local population had dismantled it. That report was flagged more loudly. Still not called a pattern. Not YET.BY the second day. There were 11 similar reports of BY the third day. There were 40-7.BY the end of the first week. HC intelligence had stopped calling them data points and started calling them what they were, a pattern. And the pattern was this. Every species inside the Veil Dominion had started, in one form or another, to do the same thing. They were stopping. Tribute shipment stopped first because they were the easiest thing to stop, the most immediate thing, the least complicated act of refusal. You just did not load the ships, you just let the deadline pass. You just sat inside the silence of a task done every cycle for generations and chose, this cycle, not to do it. Then the temples. Some were dismantled, some were simply closed, doors shut, lights off. The daily revelation broadcasting in empty rooms. Some sacred objects were returned to Veil offices in carefully packed containers, with polite notes attached. The Thorath sent theirs that way. The same stubborn, stone-minded species who had once taken 19 days to surrender and then had worshipped with complete and sincere belief for 600 years. They packed each sacred item in its own small box, all nested neatly inside one larger one. Their notes said, "We have been considering recent events. We believe we require more time." Commander Ibro was called to an intelligence briefing. He stood over the projected map and stared at the marked systems, each one highlighted in the order its local changes had begun. After a while, he said, "All of them?" The intelligence officer nodded. "All 11. Different speeds, different forms, but all moving." Ibra looked at the map for a long time. Then he thought about the 12 ships that had gone home, about the path they had taken through Dominion space, about what the crews on those ships would have seen from system to system as they passed through what had once been a perfect empire. "They saw it happening," he said quietly. "Yes," the officer replied, "in real time." "Yes." Neither of them finished the thought aloud. They did not need to. The Urith broadcast came on the 15th day. The Urith were not important by any Dominion measure at a population of roughly 12 million.1 moon, and military, and starfaring capability, and major resources 600 years under Veil authority. That be why all sensible calculation. They had the fewest reasons to move first and the most reasons to wait quietly and see what the larger species decided. Their broadcast came on the Veil Zone. Holy frequency, the sacred channel, the one reserved for divine transmission, the one no subject species had ever dared to touch. The message was one word in Veil, Just one. No, that was all point one word on the holy frequency. From a species of 12 million people on a single moon, 600 years in a subjugation. HC intelligence intercepted it, decoded it, read it, then sat in silence. At last one of the analysts, a young woman named Park who had been on 12 straight hours of signal monitoring and was maybe a little beyond professional distance at that point, read the translation aloud. Quietly, like something that deserved to be heard. No, the room stayed still. Then Park said, mostly to herself, 12 million people. No warships. 600 years. No one added anything. There was nothing to add. Atomy started taking double shifts. Not because anyone ordered him to, because he was 23 and history was happening on his scope, and leaving for normal sleep felt a little like turning his back on it. He slept in 4-hour pieces. He ate at a station. He watched the pattern spread through Dominion space like fire catching in dry places. Point one system. Then another. Then 3 more. Then a chain of them. He thought about how fire really moved. Not because each burning thing made a separate decision to burn, but because heat changes conditions. Because one ignition point, if it burns hard enough and long enough, makes burning possible elsewhere. He thought about the unbroken covenant. What it had done, and what it had not done. IT had not swept through Dominion space with guns lit, breaking chains by force. IT had not liberated anyone in the storybook version of Liberation. IT had done one thing. IT had held 0.8 minutes and 40 seconds against 127 ships, and afterward it had remained on the scope, still there. That was all that IT had shown the Urith and the Thorath and the Orith and every other species that had ever felt the veil frequency shaking in their bones. One simple thing. Not certainty, not safety, not easy victory, only possibility. That was enough. He started writing the letter to his sister in pieces between checks. A paragraph, here. 3 lines there. He wrote about the bread, about Vasquez's mug, about the scope, about what it looked like when 127 contacts became 12. He wrote, I keep thinking about the fact that we laughed. Then, not because we weren't afraid. We were afraid. Everyone on this ship was afraid. I think the Admiral was afraid too, somewhere under wherever she keeps it. But we laughed anyway. And I think there is something in that I still don't understand. He stopped. Read it over. Then added, maybe it has something to do with what you cannot take from people who do not believe it ever belonged to you in the first place. He saved the draft. Went back to his scope. On the 21st day, Orithel addressed the Dominion Council. Not publicly. Only the Council. 31 representatives of the internal body that had handled the practical running of the Dominion, while men like Orithel carried its theology. He stood before them without notes and told the story exactly as it had happened. The Form 7 seed, the paperwork, the press conference clip, Ambassador Brossard, and the wrong chair, the compressed moon, the 8 minutes and 40 seconds, the 12 ships returning through systems that were no longer behaving as they had before. He told it without softening anything, without explaining it away, without building protection around it. When he finished, the chamber was silent. An older council member, one who had been serving since before Orithel's ministry began, finally asked, what action do you recommend? Orithel looked around the chamber. T-31 faces lit with colors not meant for calm or control. The same strange colors his own skin had shown when he sat in the command chair and finally understood what had happened. Then he said, we should understand that for 4,000 years we have mistaken compliance for confirmation. No one moved. Compliance, he said again. Not belief. Not recognition of what we are. Compliance created by fear. By awe. By a display of force so total that refusal became unthinkable. He paused. The humans made refusal thinkable. That's what they did. That is the only thing they did. And it was enough. A council elder asked, are you saying the revelation is false? Orithel thought before he answered. Not because he did not know what he felt, because words still mattered to him too much to waste them. Then he said, very carefully, I am saying that a truth which requires fear in order to survive is not the kind of truth I believed we possessed. No one answered. The chamber held the words the way large rooms hold difficult things, not resolving them, just containing them until time can do what argument cannot. Orithel did not stay for the debate. He went to his quarters that he stood by the window. The view there was different from the one on the throne of First Light. Not open dark, a courtyard, a pale home sky, a familiar star burning above a world that had existed long before his faith and would still exist long after whatever came next. He looked at his hands that he thought about the 11 species, about the Thorath in particular, the sincere Thorath, the ones who had really believed that he wondered what they were feeling now, whether what they had felt in Revelation had still been real, even if the frame around it had been wrong, whether truth and meaning were the same thing, or whether they could come apart. And if they could, what remained after the separation, that he did not find answers, that he thought that was probably right, on the unbroken covenant. Admiral Vance signed the after-action report that IT was long. Reports for events this size were always long. Damage logs, weapons authorizations, communication transcripts, strike execution timing, system failures, structural assessments, casualty review. There was one line she read twice in OHC casualties. She had seen it already in the preliminary file. Now she saw it again in the final. She read it straight through, with no change in her face. Then she set the report down and sat still for a moment. Not reviewing, not planning, not working on the next task, just sitting. She thought about a ship she had commanded 22 years earlier. Smaller ship, crew of 91. Another species that had announced itself with force and certainty and grandeur. She thought about 43 names she still knew by memory, in order. Then she looked back at the line to NOHC casualties. She signed the report, set it in the outgoing stack. Then went to get more coffee. Atomy finished the letter on the 23rd day. It was longer than he had meant it to be. IT covered more than he had planned. The bread, the mug, the scope, the 8 minutes, the Urith and their single word on the holy frequency, the pattern spreading through the Dominion like heat spreading through dry wood. The last paragraph took the longest. He wrote, I don't know what happens next. I don't think anyone does. The veils still exist. Their ships are still out there. The 11 species are in the middle of something they have never done before. They're going to need things from us and from themselves that nobody has figured out yet. The galaxy looks different than it did a month ago, and I'm not sure we have the right words for what it looks like now. Then he stopped and added, but I keep thinking about the Urith. 12 million people. No warships. 600 years of being told what they were, who made them, and what their purpose was. Then one day they saw that someone else had said a word first, and they remembered that the word existed in their own language too. He wrote, No then, I think that is the whole story. I think everything else, the ship, the battle, the 8 minutes, was just us showing them that the word was real. That had weight, and that the weight was survivable. The very end he wrote, Stay curious about the aliens, Amara, but don't be afraid of them. The ones worth understanding are the ones trying to understand us back. The ones who aren't, we've handled worse. He sent the letter. Then went back to his scope. The contact zone was quiet now that a salvage team was cataloging the debris field. The 12 Veil ships were somewhere inside Dominion space, traveling home through an empire that was deciding, system by system, what wanted to be next. The Covenant still held position, scorched, leaning slightly. .1 engine at 15%. Still there. Around it, the stars burned the way they always had, steady, indifferent, older than every story any species had ever told about them. Humans had always looked at the dark and want to place something inside it, something vast, something wise, something that could look back. The stars never looked back, they only burned, and in their light, one battered ship sat in the quiet of a contact zone that was no longer a battlefield, but not yet peace either. IT waited in that long middle place between what had been and what came next. And it waited the way humans wait, with coffee going cold, with bread going stale, with letters written and sent, with a scope to watch, with work to do, with that plain, unglamorous, undefeatable habit of continuing, always continuing. The unbroken covenant came home on a Tuesday. N01 had planned for Tuesday. The repair schedule had slipped twice. First, because the port side shield emitters needed replacement parts that were moving through a supply chain with very weak feelings about punctuality. Second, because one of the 41 smaller strike ships had taken enough damage that the whole return convoy had to slow down. You did not leave your own people behind in deep space just to make a better entrance. That was not how the HC did things. It was Tuesday. The dry dock above New Geneva was quiet when they arrived. Not empty. Places like that were never empty. But quiet in the way places get quiet when they have been waiting for something and it has finally arrived, and now everyone is absorbing what they are looking at. Dock crews in magnetic boots moved over the Covenant's scarred hull with the careful attention of people reading a text they had never seen before. They traced burn marks, stress fractures, warped plating, places where the metal had been pushed past what anyone had designed it to survive. The port side damage was especially bad. Point one dock chief, a woman named Brandt who had spent 19 years inspecting military ships and had seen wrecks in every condition creative classification could allow, stood for a long time beside the midship damage on the port side. She ran a hand over one section of hull where the metal had not just bent, it had crystallized. The sustained energy load had changed it. At the molecular level, she had never seen that before. She took 3 photographs, flagged them for the materials science team, said nothing dramatic. She was not a dramatic person, but she stood there for a while. The Covenant settled into its dock cradle. The umbilicals locked. The crew started disembarking in the same order Vance preferred for everything. An O ceremony, an O symbolic first walk. No speech. The people who needed to get off the ship got off it in the order that made practical sense. Atomy stepped onto the dock platform at 1340 station time. Then he stopped, just for a second. The platform was solid. IT was not moving. IT was not listing. IT was not carrying heat from a battle through its walls. Around in the dock was full of motion. Cargo rigs, repair crews, lift systems, clipped voices, task lists, the smell of station air that was different from ship air in a way he could not define, but recognized instantly. He had been aboard the Covenant for 31 weeks, that he stood there and breathed. Then he picked up his kit bag and went to debrief. There were 4 debriefs over the next 6 days. The first was tactical, senior officers, strike package review. Damage review. The 8 minutes and 40 seconds broken into clean numbered pieces. Atomy was not senior enough to sit at the main table. He waited outside, answered precise questions when called in, and said only what he knew for certain. The second debrief was psychological, standard after-action assessment. Mandatory for everyone who had been aboard a ship under that level of sustained fire. A counselor named Dr. Reyes handled the session. She was mild, careful, and exact. She asked about sleep, appetite, flashback moments, whether he found himself back on the bridge in his mind without meaning to be there. He answered honestly. Sleep was uneven. Appetite was fine. Yes, sometimes he caught himself staring at a wall as if it were a scope. Dr. Reyes wrote everything down. She did not perform concern. She was simply thorough. In that room, thoroughness felt kind. The third debrief was intelligence. What had he observed? What had he heard? What had he noticed from a station that maybe had not entered the official record cleanly? He gave them everything. Observation was one of the few parts of the job he knew with confidence. He was good at. He was precise. The fourth debrief was the strangest. A smaller room. 2 civilians. In uniforms. The kind of quiet people who had clearly spent years asking large questions in small rooms. They did not ask him about weapons fire. They did not ask about hull damage. They did not ask about trauma markers. They asked him what he thought it meant. Atomy was quiet for a while. He thought about the letter to his sister, about the Urith, about Orethal's voice on the private line, asking what kind of species was afraid, and still said no. Then he said, I think we gave them a word. The civilians looked at him. The species inside the Dominion, he said. They already had the word. Every language has that word. It's one of the first words any people ever need. It's a survival word. You need it before you need almost anything else. He paused. I think they had forgotten they were allowed to use it on something that big. And we reminded them. The civilians wrote that down. One of them asked, how does that make you feel? Atomy thought about the question, then said, like we did something real. He looked at the table. Not just the battle. The whole thing. The paperwork. The press conference. The 60 days. The 8 minutes. All of it. It was one argument said in different ways. And the argument was simple. He took a breath. You can say no and survive it. He paused, then added quietly, I hope it was worth what it cost them. The ones who said it first. The Eurith. 12 million people. No worships. They said no on the holy frequency before they knew how it would end. He looked up. That took something I don't have a word for. The civilians wrote that down too. Then they thanked him that he went back to his quarters and slept for 11 straight hours. Before his next posting, he went home for 2 weeks. Lagos was still Lagos. Full noise. Full color point, 20 million people with no interest at all in becoming quieter for anyone else's emotional convenience. He loved it immediately and without reserve. The traffic, the heat, the layered sound of music, voices, machines, and life all refusing to happen one at a time. That IT was the place. That had made him that IT had no intention of apologizing for that. His mother fed him for 4 days before asking much of anything. She was a practical woman. She took one look at him when he came through the door and understood what kind of help was useful first. Food, sleep, home. Only after that came questions. On the 5th day, she made tea and sat across from him at the kitchen table. Then she said so. That was enough. He told her. Not everything. Not the classified pieces. Not the hidden strike package details or the specific numbers behind the trap, but the shape of it, the 47 ships, the paperwork, the ambassador in the wrong chair, the press conference, the 8 minutes, the Eurith. She listened, drank her tea, did not perform shock, did not perform awe, did not turn a story into theater. When he finished, she said, and you're all right. It was not fully a question. Yes, he said. She looked at him the way mothers look at their children when they're deciding whether the answer they received is the whole truth or only the useful piece of it. Eventually, she nodded. IT was true enough. Then she poured more tea. Amara had read his letter 6 times. The first time slowly, the second time faster, then slow again for the part she wanted to keep. She had shown it to her friend Kim, who thought the part about the coffee mug was funny. She had not shown it to anyone else. Some things were not for everyone. She understood that already at 12. She had questions, not the questions adults kept asking on the news, not about fleet policy or diplomatic impact or outer sector doctrine. Those were real questions. They would matter, but they were not the question that interested her. She had been turning the real one over in her head since the 3rd reading, like a specimen that did not match the book's description, like something that made you look back and forth between the object and the explanation and think. One of these is wrong. On the 6th evening after he came home, she waited until dinner was done. Their mother was in the other room. The dishes were mostly cleared. The kitchen had taken on the quiet that arrives at the end of a day when the work has been done but the room still remembers it. Then she sat across from him and said, I have a question about the veil. He looked up. Okay. About the gods part, she said. He nodded. She thought carefully before speaking. Amara was precise with language in the way people are precise when they want to become scientists. She understood already that the words you choose change the thing you're trying to measure. Then she said, if they needed us to believe it, were they ever really gods at all? The kitchen went quiet. Outside the window, Lagos kept being Lagos. Traffic, voices, music from somewhere 2 streets away, the layered sound of a city too alive to lower its volume for philosophy. Under it was another quiet, the quiet of 2 people at a table looking at a question too large to answer quickly. Adamy looked at his sister. She was 12. She had their mother's eyes, their father's stubbornness, and something else that belonged only to her, the way of looking at things that made them feel. Honestly seen, he thought about Orithel, about the chamber, about the strange colors in veil skin after the battle, about 4,000 years of certainty that had never once had to survive honest refusal. He thought about what happens to a truth that has lived all its life inside rooms where disagreement is not permitted. Then he said, I don't know. Amara nodded. She had expected that or something near it. She was not disappointed. Honest uncertainty was more interesting to her than easy confidence. But he said carefully, I think that question is going to matter for a very long time. Longer than the battle? She asked. He gave a small breath that was almost a laugh. Much longer than the battle. The battle was 8 minutes. The question is, he stopped, looked at his hands, still steady. Always steady now when he noticed them. The question is going to stay around as long as there are people asking it, he said, which means for a very long time. She sat with that, then said, I want to study them. The veil, and the Dominion species. All of them. He nodded. There's going to be a lot to understand. Yes, she said, there is. That, to her mind, settled the issue. Then she stood and cleared the last cups from the table because clearing the table was her job, and she still did her jobs, even when the universe was in the middle of changing shape. At the sink. With her back to him, she said, if they needed belief to be gods, then maybe belief was the part that mattered. Not them. The belief itself. Atomy said nothing. She rinsed a cup, set in the rack. And if the belief is gone, she said, then maybe what they are matters less than what everyone else decides to be instead. She finished the dishes, went to her room. Atomy stayed at the table for a while after she left. He did not know that night what she would do with that question. He did not know she would carry it into a xenobiology degree, then into doctoral work, then into a field that did not even exist yet, a field that would one day be called comparative belief systems after 40 years of argument and resistance, and people insisting it was not a real discipline until it was too useful to deny. He did not know that her work on post-Dominion psychological recovery would later change how the HC handled first contact forever. He did not know that the line she had spoken at age 12, in a Lagos kitchen over drying cups and city noise, would one day become the first line of her most important paper, written exactly as she had said it. If they needed us to believe it, were they ever really gods at all? He did not know any of that. He sat there and thought about the covenant in dry dock, about Brand's hand on the crystallized hull, about the 4 seconds when the port side lights had gone out and come back, about Vasquez's coffee mug shattering on the floor, about the almost laugh from somewhere on the bridge at exactly the wrong moment. He thought about Vance, about what she might be doing right then. Probably in a hearing, probably drinking coffee that had gone cold, probably saying as little as possible with the particular efficiency of a woman who understood silence had its own use that he thought about. Orathel, too, about what a god becomes when the room holding belief empties, about whether something could still be what it claimed to be if no one agreed any longer that the claim was true, about what it cost to spend 70 years certain of something and then sit down in a command chair surrounded by the wreckage of that certainty. He reached no conclusions that felt appropriate. Far out in the outer sectors, the Urith moon kept turning. The holy frequency was quiet now. N.O. Veil broadcast, N.O. daily. Revelation forcing itself into the bones of 12 million people. Just silence, clean silence, silence that belonged entirely to them. Some of the oldest Urith found it strange, not because they still believed, not really, but because 600 years of sound leave a shape behind when it goes away. Some admitted, privately, that they missed the broadcast a little, not the doctrine, the consistency, the bigness, the fact that something had always been there. Others said the silence was the best thing they had ever heard. Most were somewhere in the middle. That was probably honest, too. They were learning how to live without a voice that had once claimed ownership of the dark above them. That kind of learning does not happen all at once. It happens slowly, to imperfectly. The speed people can survive it. The moon turned. Its gas giant kept moving through its own long orbit, enormous and beautiful and entirely indifferent. The stars above the Urith moon were many and old. They said nothing. They never had. They only burned. Not because anyone needed them to. Not because anyone had made them to. Not because their light carried purpose. They burned because that was simply what they were. The Urith looked up at them the way living things always eventually look up. And for the first time in 600 years, they looked with the particular awareness of beings who had not learned something new, but remembered something old. That the sky belonged to them too. That the dark belonged to anyone willing to look into it. That no one who demanded worship had the right to own what was above everyone. The moon turned. Night came. And in Lagos, in a city of 20 million people that had no interest in becoming quieter for anything, a 12-year-old girl sat at her desk and opened a blank document. I could see the top of the page. In the careful handwriting of someone who took first line seriously, she wrote, "If they needed us to believe it, were they ever really gods at all?" She looked at the sentence. for a while, did not try to answer it yet. Then she left it there at the top of the page and went to sleep. The question stayed in the dark room after she was gone. Waiting, patient, the way all good questions are patient.